Fellow Toastmasters, thanks again for being at our meeting today. The purpose of Kireet's speech as Kireet's evaluator is for the member to practice skills needed to address audience challenges when he or she presents outside of the Toastmasters Club or in any cohesive group. The 5 to 7 minute speech, the entire time for this is 10 to 15 minutes on any topic, and practice responding to audience member disruptions. So the key is to how to handle audience disruptions and gain control of the room. The speech may be new or previously presented, and the speech content can be evaluated, or the entire give and take between the audience and the presenter can be evaluated. So that would be the objectives, Mr. Toastmaster. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evaluator. And now it's time for Kireet for his speech. Please, Mr. President.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, everybody. Let's have a quick show of hands if you've been through a financial crisis. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. This part is called, or I'd like to call this part, having a vector, because you have two pieces of important information. Each one of you that had your hands way up, you know how much money you've got, and you know which direction it's going in a financial crisis. Please raise your hands if you are a homeowner or if you were a homeowner in your lives at some point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, everybody, I'll stop counting. And I'm assuming the folks who are not on video, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, if you add those survey numbers, the folks who just voted saying, yes, I've been in a financial crisis, and yes, I have been a homeowner, or I am a homeowner, you add that up and you'll get some idea of the number of hardships I had to face when I was a first-time homeowner about 11 years ago. Now, it was a time of having a very rough schedule. I was a master's student. I was midway through my master's program in computer science. I was working as a full-time developer, and I had a second job to make ends meet. I was a lab GA, working late hours at night, kind of sleeping 3-4 hours a day. So it was crazy. But it was also a time when I was resolute. I'd made up my mind. I was determined to own my own house. I could be sitting here and tell you that one fine day I woke up and I decided I wanted a big bungalow, and my parents gave me the money and I had this direction, and within a week I found it. But you'll know right over there that most of those statements are not up to snuff. The truth of the matter is, folks, in 2007, we were all reeling from the recession. So fast forward 2 years from there, we were still confused. It was kind of a chaotic, confusing time for a lot of us. And for myself, I had just entered the job market not too long ago at that time. So I'd made up my mind. I wanted to be a homeowner. I wanted to do something for my parents also, kind of let them know that I can support them when the time comes. So I said, okay, let's think about this. Let's do some homework, because I'm a researcher as well. I started attending seminars. I started looking at YouTube videos, the bad ones, the good ones, the ugly ones. And I started feeling good about the research I did. And I got so much advice that I didn't know up from down. I mean, it was stuff like, oh man, you should invest your money in stocks. No, just gamble. How about just getting a girlfriend? Some of my friends said, man, just smoke this joint, you'll be okay. You know, you're from the South Side. You don't need no house, homie. I got all sorts of crazy advice. And the girlfriend thing kept coming up over and over again. So I took a hint and I went, it's okay. You know what? I'm satisfied. I've done proper methodical research and everything's going to be okay, right? Well, wrong. Nothing was okay. For starters, I had to change agents 3 times over 5 months or something. And that's because I've seen all sorts of homes. I'd seen new homes, old homes, abandoned homes, dilapidated homes. I even saw homes with black magic and voodoo done in it. And that didn't bother me. What bothered me was I was declined for a pre-qualification letter because I had okay credit. Come on, I mean, I was 24, 25. There's no way I would have had the 800 plus credit. And I said, that's okay. Because again, I was determined to be successful. I was determined to be a homeowner. And I started just kind of marching down this path of believing in everything being okay, connecting the dots, all that self-talk, motivational stuff. And after 4 months of searching with a new agent who was doing right by us, she showed us a house in Cumming, Georgia. And I thought, this is it. I found the dream home. There's this light shining on my path and I can just follow it to success. It was affordable at $200,000, honestly. And I was only $195,000 short. That's how much money I'd need because I had $5K in my bank account. And everything was okay with the house except for the fact that it had carpet all over the house in the restrooms as well. Everything was okay about the house except for the fact that it had in the backyard a road cutting across, or Atlanta Highway. And to be specific, I was 30 feet from Atlanta Highway. So when tractor trailers were going by at night, I could almost hear them shudder till I evolved. And I had some selective hearing. I developed that, and I had some curtains. And we took care of that noise pollution by adding a tree or two. But that was later. At that time in my life, my folks knew that my heart was set on this house. They offered to help me with some of the mortgage payments or a down payment. And I said, nope, I'm not having any of that. I've got to do this on my own. I'm a man, I'm grown up. And the time came for closing. I walked in there into the attorney's office, and the homeowners at the time looked at me and they went, oh, is Mr. Kokala going to be here? Like, are you going to go call your dad? And I went, oh, no, that's me. Shh, I'm here to buy the house. They weren't buying it. They thought it was some sort of prank. I said, no, that's really me. That's who's going to be buying this house from you. And long story cut short, I solved the problem, guys. I got the closing money. And there were a lot of things I was finding out in the process, signatures, so on and so forth. But I had the money to close the house. But I created another problem. The day I owned the house, I had $33 left in my bank account. And like that phone call, the $33 was unexpected. It lasted briefly. If you look at the duration of that phone call through this meeting, it's probably just 2 seconds. And those $33, it's never happened again. And I pray it happens to nobody. But it did occur, and I didn't plan on it. But I knew that I would make up for it in time. So I didn't let it drag me down. Now, I lived paycheck to paycheck for a couple of months. I made up for that financial loss. And at this time, I'm going to take a pause and ask you guys to assess the situation. And given the situation, what would you say constitutes a prepared mindset? Is it A, cutting down on my expenses back then by maybe just having bananas for my meals? I don't know. Cutting down on any sort of gambling debts or other addictions I may have had? Or C, none of the above? Just think mentally and transmit your thoughts. And I think all of you picked the right answer, which is D, which is really none of those choices. And that's because I speak in jest, I'm just joking here, but honestly, at that time, I didn't have the right answer. It took me some time to arrive at a proper mitigation plan or financial plan. And
Kireet, sorry, how much your paycheck was at that time?
great question, Mike. Sorry, Jack, great question. Like, I didn't anticipate this question. There were questions being thrown at me front, right, and center. I was probably making way too little to own that house. That's the safest answer I can give you. Now, I'll give you more answers when we have a little bit of Q&A time at the end, but I don't think I was making nearly enough to own that house, to be honest. But where I was going with that was, though I lost some time at arriving at a proper financial plan, I didn't stop doing two things. Number one, I didn't stop having faith. I believed in a higher power. I believed in God's plan. And I thought that I am kind of walking on this energetic path of success as long as I keep my determination and I have satisfaction on kind of improving my situation. So I started having a different sort of ethos around me. I started thinking, well, I need to remedy my work situation and make a little more money. And let's do that. So I picked up a lot of books. I cultivated some new habits, learned a lot of new technologies, and that failed. I did not get a new job. It took me another year before I moved to Hewlett Packard. And that started helping me. So I started looking at the small gains I had made in terms of closing the debt a little more, improving my situation, understanding the stock market maybe, but not still making any good moves, but figuring out where I can be in a couple more years down the road. But as I was doing all that, guys, this is a house. A house is almost like a breathing entity. I started coming up on AC repairs. I started figuring out these things are due. They're called HOA dues. There was damage done. There was soil erosion. There were about 100 projects that sucked my energy out of me. And I figured out a lot about that process. A lot of it is rewarding. Some of it is bittersweet. You end up making lifelong friendships with your neighbors and you figure out all these nuances in your neighborhood. But essentially, you make up for the gaps in your thought process and whatever you try to achieve. Your shortcomings, basically. Once again, owning a house is saying that you've extended yourself. A house is an extension of yourself. And that's what I thought, because over the years, I planned on something, I achieved it, I endeavored, I was satisfied. And after 8 long years of home ownership, I ended up selling that house for a minor profit. And I realized that I needed to downsize. So over the past 3 years, my wife and I, we've been in a smaller house. And now I have some new goals. I'm determined now when I wake up to be the best husband that I can, to be the best father that I can to my daughter, and to be a good leader, to be a good community member, to be a servant leader, if you will. And where I'm going with all this is saying that you'll still face the knowns and unknowns alike with homeownership or any sort of phase in your life that's clouded with uncertainty. But as long as you do your best and you're satisfied as you're chipping away at your goals, you're going to be okay. And the worst thing that can happen to you when you pour your heart into something, when you dedicate yourself, is that you can actually be good. Because you're not going to fail, you will learn. And that is my message to all of you, my fellow Toastmasters, Mr. Toastmaster, Mr. Evaluator, distinguished members. I am grateful for the privilege of your time and attention. And while we still have time, we can open it up. We can open up this speech for maybe 1 or 2 brief questions. More comments?
A real question. Do you have any doubt you bought house? If it's happened again, would you stay 1 more year in rent or not?
I would. I probably would. If it happened again, I would stay there or I would rent it out, but not sell that house because I could have gotten more or I could have just stayed put. Good question. Any others? Questions or comments or concerns?
So Kireet, what advice then would you give you mentioned when you went to the closing, they were looking for your dad. So for children, I'm not sure if you have children or not, but for children that you may have, what advice would you give them when they're in a similar situation, when they're in their early 20s?
Wow, I've been thinking about this. When my daughter does grow up, I'd like to have them start on smaller investments so that if they're faced in this situation, let's take it up 10 levels. What if they're getting their own company? We're talking about some real fiscal responsibility. So I think a house is good. It should start with smaller goals, probably with pets and other things, maybe a lemonade stand, maybe a part-time job, maybe understanding penny stocks. But as they do these things as children take part in these endeavors or partake in other activities, I think they'll bestow the confidence they need to make these commitments, because a house is a pleasure, but it's also a lifelong commitment. And I think that's the advice I would give them, to start small so that when you get there and someone asks you, hey, is that your dad? You can go, yeah, I'm buying this for him or her, just to let them know, hey, I've got their backs too. I'm here to make a family decision, or we're helping somebody else. And that would be some advice I think anybody could use. Good question, Clay. All right, folks, in the interest of time, thank you so much for your participation and for making this a valuable two-way learning experience for me. Thank you.